Chapter 10 of Mr. INCOUL'S Misadventure. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lynn Thompson. Mr. INCOUL'S Misadventure by Edgar Saltus. Chapter 10. The Point of View. On leaving the villa, Lenox Leigh experienced a number of conflicting emotions, and at last found relief in sleep. The day that followed he passed in chambered solitude. It was possible that some delegate from Mr. Incoul might wish to exchange a word with him, and in accordance with the unwritten statutes of what is seemly, it behoved him to be in readiness for the exchange of that word. Moreover, he was expectant of a line from Maida, some word indicative of the course of conduct which he should pursue, some message, in fact, which would aid him to rise from the uncertainty in which he groped. As a consequence, he remained in his room. He was not one to whom solitude is irksome. Indeed, he had often found it grateful in its refreshment, but to be enjoyable, solitude should not be coupled with suspense. In that case it is uneasiness magnified by the infinite, and if fear be analysed, what is it save the dread of the unknown? When the nerves are unstrung, a calamity is often a tonic. The worst that can be has been done, the blow has fallen, and with the falling, fear vanishes, hope returns, the healing process begins at once. The uneasiness which visited Lenox Leigh came precisely from his inability to determine whether or not a blow was impending. As to the blow, he cared, in the abstract, very little. If it were to be given, let it be dealt and be done with. That which alone troubled him was his ignorance of what had ensued after his meeting with Mr. Incoul, and his incapacity to foresee in what manner the consequences of that meeting would affect his relations with Mr. Incoul's wife. In this uncertainty he looked at the matter from every side, and, that he might get the broadest view, he recalled the incidents connected with the meeting. The facts of the case seemed then to resolve themselves into this. Mr. Incoul had unexpectedly returned to his home after midnight, and had met a friend of his wife's descending the stair. Their greeting, if formal, had been perfectly courteous. The departing guest had informed the returning husband at what hotel he was stopping, and that gentleman had expressed the hope that he was comfortable. Certainly there was nothing extraordinary in that. People who dwelled in recondite regions might see impropriety in a call that extended up to and beyond midnight, whereas others who lived in more liberal centres might consider it the most natural thing in the world. It was, then, merely the point of view, and what was the point of view which Mr. Incoul had adopted? If he considered it an impropriety, why had he seemed so indifferent? And, if he considered it natural and proper, why should he have been so damned civil? Why should he have expressed the hope that his wife's guest was comfortable at a hotel? Was the expression of that hope merely a commonplace rejoinder, or was it an intentional slur? Surely everyone possessed of the brain of a medium-sized rabbit feels that it is as absurd to expect an intelligent being to be comfortable in a hotel as it is to suppose that he can find enjoyment in an evening party or amusement in a comic paper. Then again, and this after all was the great question, was the return of Mr. Incoul intentional or accidental? If it was intentional, if he had gone away intending that he would be absent all night, merely that by an unexpected return he might verify any suspicions which he may have harboured, then in driving to his door in a rumbling coach he had shown himself a very poor plotter. On the other hand, if the return were accidental, had it served to turn a suspicionless husband into a suspicious one? And if it had so served, how far did those suspicions extend? Did he think that his wife and her guest had been occupied with aimless chit-chat, or did he believe that their conversation had been of a personal and intimate nature? As Lennox pondered over these things, it seemed to him that, let Mr. Incoul suspect what he might, the one and unique cause for apprehension lay in the attitude which Maida had assumed when her husband, after closing the door, had gone to her in search of an explanation. That he had so gone there was to him no possible doubt, and it was in the expectancy of tidings as to the result of that explanation that he waited the entire day in his room. But the afternoon waned into dusk and still no tidings came. As the hours wore on his uneasiness decreased. "Bah!" he muttered to himself at last. "In the winter I gave all my mornings to Pyrrho and Ænesidemus, and here 6 months later during the entire day I bother myself about eventualities." He sighed wearily with an air of self–disgust, and rising from the sofa on which his meditations had been passed, he went to the window. The Casino opposite was already illuminated. "They will be there to–night," he thought. "I have been a fool for my pains. If Maida hasn't written, it is because there has been nothing to write. I will look them up after dinner, and everything will be as before." He took off his morning suit and got himself into evening dress. He tied his white cravat without emotion, with a precision that was geometric in its accuracy, and to hold the tie in place he ran a silver pin through the collar without so much as pricking his neck. He was thoroughly at ease. The fear of the blow had passed. Pyrrho, Ænesidemus, the whole corps of ataraxists, had surged suddenly and rescued him from the toils of the inscrutable. At a florist's in the street below he found an orchid, with which he decked his button–hole, and then in search of dinner he sauntered into Helder's, a restaurant on the main street, a trifle above the Grand Hotel. It was crowded. There did not seem to be a single table unoccupied. He hesitated for a moment, and was about to go elsewhere, when he noticed some one signalling to him from the remoter end of the garden. He could not at first make out who it was, and it was not until he had made use of a monocle that he recognized a fellow Baltimorean, Mr. Clarence May, with whom in days gone by he had been on terms approaching those of intimacy. Mr. Clarence May, more familiarly known as Clara, was a pigeon–shooter, who for some years past had been promenading the side–scenes of continental life. He was well known in the penal colonies of the Riviera, and hand in glove with some of the most distinguished rastaquouères. Yet did he happen in a proscenium, it was by accident. In appearance he was not beautiful. He was a meagre little man, possessed of vague features and an allowance of sandy hair so undetermined that few were able to remember whether or not he wore any on his face. When he spoke, it was with a slight stutter, a trick of speech which he declared he had inherited from his wet–nurse. He rose from his seat, and hurrying forward greeted Lennox as though he had seen him the week before. He was anything but an idealist, yet he treated time as though it were the veriest fiction of the non–existent, and he bombarded no one with questions as to what had become of them, or where they had been. "I have just ordered dinner," he said, in his amusing stammer. "You must share it with me." And Lennox, who had not a prejudice to his name, accepted the invitation as readily as it was made. "I don't know," May continued, when they were seated, "I don't know whether you will like the dinner. I have ordered very little. No soup, too hot, don't you think? No oysters, there are none. All out visiting, the man said. For fish I have substituted a melon. Fish at the seaside is never good. Then we are to have white truffles with a plain sauce, a Chateaubriand, salad, a bit of cheese. Voilà! How will that suit you?" Lennox nodded, as who should say, had I ordered it myself, it could not be more to my taste. And thus encouraged, May offered him a glass of Ameri–Picon, a beverage that smells like an orange and looks like ink. The dinner passed off pleasantly enough. The white truffles were excellent, and the Chateaubriand cooked to a turn. The only fault to be found was with the Brie, which May seemed to think was not as flowing as it should be. "By the way," he said at last, when coffee was served, "you know Mirette is here." "Mirette? Who is Mirette?" "Why, good gad, my dear fellow, Mirette is Mirette. The one adorable, unique, divine Mirette. You don't mean to say you never heard of her?" "I do, though perhaps she may have had the good fortune to hear of me." "Heavens alive, man, don't you read the papers?" Lenox smiled. "Why should I? I am not interested in the community. It might be stricken with dry rot, elephantiasis, and plica polonica, for aught I care. Besides, there is nothing in them. The English papers are all advertisements and aridity. The French are frivolous and obscene. I mind neither frivolity nor obscenity. Both have their uses, as flowers and cesspools have theirs, but I object to them served with my breakfast. I think if once a year a man would read a summary of the 12-month, he would get in 10 minutes a digest of all that might be necessary to know; and what is more to the point, he would have to his credit a clear profit of 200 hours at the very least, and 200 hours rightly employed are sufficient for the acquirement of such knowledge of a foreign language as will permit a man to make love in it gracefully. No, I seldom read the papers, so forgive my ignorance as to Mirette." "After such an explanation I shall have to, but if you care to learn by word of mouth that which you decline to read in print, Mirette is premier sujet." "In the ballet, you mean?" "Yes, in the ballet, and I can't for the life of me think of a ballet without her." "She must have gone to your head." "And to every one's who has seen her." "And you say she is here?" "Yes, she'll be at the Casino to–night. I'll present you if you say so." "I might take a look at her, but I fancy I shall be occupied elsewhere." "As you like." May drew out his watch. "It's after 9," he added. "If we are going to the Casino, we had better be toddling." On the way there, May entered a tobacconist's, and Lenox waited for him without. As he loitered on the curb, Blydenburg rounded an adjacent corner. "Well!" exclaimed the latter, "you didn't see our friends off." "What friends?" "The INCOUL'S, of course. Didn't you know that they had gone?" Lenox looked at him blankly. "Gone?" he echoed. "Yes, they must have sent you word. INCOUL'S seem to expect you. They have gone up to Paris. If I had known beforehand—" Mr. Blydenburg rambled on, but Lenox no longer listened. It was for this, then, that he had been bothering himself the entire day. The abruptness of the departure mystified him, yet he comforted himself with the thought that had there been anything abnormal it could not have escaped Blydenburg's attention. "And you say they expected me?" he asked at last. "Yes, they seemed to. INCOUL'S left good–bye for you. When you get to Paris, look them up." While he was speaking, May came out from the tobacconist's. "I will do so," Lenox said, and, with a parting nod, he joined his friend. As he walked on down the street to the Casino, Mr. Blydenburg looked musingly after him. He would not be a bad match for Milly, he told himself, not a bad match at all. And thinking that perhaps it might be but a question of bringing the two young people together, he presently started off in search of his daughter, and led her, lamb–like, to the Casino. But once there, he felt instinctively that for that evening at least any bringing together of the young people was impossible. Lenox was engaged in an animated conversation with a conspicuously dressed lady, whom, Mr. Blydenburg learned on inquiry, was none other than the notorious Mademoiselle Mirette, of the Théâtre National de l'Opéra. Chapter 11.